Hello, strangers. It's Tuesday, and it's story time. This is story 52. I moved into my college dorm in the fall of 2006. Internet service required a call to the local Reed monopoly in the area, internet service providers, to set up the service. The dorms were already wired by scores of students before us, but like I said, it was a monopoly, and they had us by the short hairs. My roomie and I met the cable guy at our door. He was a wall of a man, easily 6'3" and wide, not fat, but he didn't appear sickly or unhealthy. In fact, his face had this rosy flush to it. You know the type. It was the kind of skin that would redden in blotches, and this monstrous man was already flushed. My roommate quietly clicked the window unit on to add a blast of cold air to the room to make it a little more comfortable for him. Well, the guy went through the pantomime of service. He called someone on his phone and read the numbers off the existing cable jack, the one the company themselves installed and probably had written down back at headquarters. He nodded, and then he hung up. Next, he clumsily tried to upsell us on a garbage tier router. I'd bought my own, a model newer than the one he was trying to sell us, so that went no further. He didn't much put up a fight about it, which was nice. While we were very irritated about the corner we were getting backed into with the internet, we knew better than to blame the poor guy doing house calls for it. He finished jotting something on his clipboard. He ripped the carbon from under the receipt and handed it over. The whole time, he would dart his eyes at me, making intermittent, quick eye contact before shooting his gaze off in another direction. I know it sounds weird, but that, with his patchy blush, made him seem sort of bashful. I got secondhand discomfort vibes from him. I'm pretty extroverted myself, but I have plenty of friends who are shy or don't like talking to people, so I'm aware that not everyone gets their kicks from social interaction. I felt bad for the guy. He was a big bear of a man in a house call / salesman job that clearly caused him some anxiety. I really swallowed my distaste with the obvious shakedown of the cable company and tried to be as friendly as possible. I also filled the silence with small talk about how the influx of students every fall must be like their busy season, etc. I'm stressing this so you understand how out of pocket things got later. When I talked to him, I talked about the most impersonal flow of conversation in an effort to ease his discomfort only. I had my own customer service smile plastered on my face, but the topics were restricted to generic, obvious, job-related duties, platitudes, not anything showing a personal interest in the man himself. He seemed grateful that I kept up the patter. He grinned shyly and readjusted his blue cap to smooth his wiry, curly brown hair pretty often. The work concluded, receipt in hand, he still stood in our dorm. I said something like, "I'm sure you're busy. Have a ton of these to get to this afternoon." He nodded. A pause. Then my roommate added, "Thanks for stopping by. We hope you have a good day." He nodded again, agreeing it was a good day. And still he stood. Feeling my customer service smile threaten to split wider into a grimace, I stepped past him to the door leading out to the hallway. I told him, "Here, let me get this door for you. We really appreciate you coming by." Only when I opened the door to the hallway, to students walking by, did he move to leave. When the door closed behind him, my roomie looked at me with widened eyes gesturing at the door. What was that about? I chalked it up to nervousness and told her as much. He was all elbows and tripping over his giant sandwich loaf feet as he'd followed me to the door, and then finally retreated down the hall. But my roomie wasn't feeling quite as generous about it. She denounced it as awkward, to which I shrugged, laughing a little. I didn't disagree, but at least we had internet now. And we did. So as the week progressed, we were able to stream music, watch some shows, and generally get ready for the next week. But before a whole week had passed, something else happened. It was Saturday, around 8 p.m., when a knock came on my dorm room door. My roomie had gone out to a local bar to tie a few on before class got serious, and we had to be in study all the time mode. I got up to answer the door. I wondered who it could be. I didn't know, but when I answered it, I was generally expecting an RA, a friend from class. I was not expecting who was there. The door swung open. The light from the hallway ceiling lamps was blotted out almost entirely by the form of the giant cable installer guy. He was still in his uniform that night, but it was unbuttoned, showing the white undershirt beneath it. He stood there, grinning down at me in that ticky, nervous way, but he didn't say a word. I was puzzled. I asked him, "Oh, hi again. Did you forget something?" He quickly began nodding. I waited for him to, tell me what he thought he was missing. But he didn't speak. After another pause, he just waved a massive hand at his tool belt. Apparently, he was going to be speaking in mime. It was weird. He'd spoken before just fine. But the sooner he got whatever he forgot, the sooner he and this weirdness would go away. So I just said something like, "Oh, okay." I watched him, wondering if he was going to mime swinging a hammer so I could get what he wanted me to retrieve. But then he took a step forward, and I automatically and stupidly stepped aside. I did it without thinking. It was like that trick of extending your hand to offer something for another person to hold. Body language and societal norms about politeness will have you reaching out to take the thing without even thinking about it. So when he lumbered in, I danced backwards, maintaining the short distance we'd had at the door. I glanced around the room. I needed to break the fever of eye contact with him. Though he was still silent, and before I'd taken him for a shy guy, this time his eye contact was insistent and heated. But as I looked about, it slowly dawned on me. What tool could he have forgotten? He hadn't used a tool last time. He'd literally come in, used his phone to call the jack number in, tried to thrust a crappy router at us, and had been shown the door. So, what could he possibly have left behind? As I turned back to face the man, two things happened simultaneously. He'd moved far enough into our room that our door had swung shut, and his hands had moved to the front of his pants. You've heard of fight or flight, sure, but my gear was freeze. In utter shock and disbelief, I could only watch as he freed his, it was just out of the fly. It looked as flushed with what I'd taken as embarrassment as his face did. I started stammering something, anything that could strike the balance between, "Please, no, I don't want that," and "Please, no, don't hurt me." But at hearing my polite refusal, he only licked his lips and stepped forward. Oh God, when I tell you I felt like I could vomit, I started tasting that acrid stomach rise. I just couldn't think of what to do. My brain stumbled and bumbled in its own flash of conversation. "What are you doing? Run! Run!" "Run where? He's blocking the door. He'll catch me." "Don't let him catch you. It'll tick him off that you ran away. Don't piss off this wall of a man whose thigh is as big around as your waist, or you'll regret it." "But you must get away. He's too close. Too close. You can smell his sweat like it's already touched you. Scream! Scream for help. Don't piss him off. If you scream, it'll piss him off. You don't know if you can loud or quick enough to alert somebody before he..." The entire time my mind was racing. My body was locked completely still, and he kept advancing. So, what did I finally do? I did it without thinking at all, reflexively. I felt my lips stretch into a rictus smile, and my tone took on customer service voice. I began shaking my head. No, I don't want to, but thank you. Please stop." It was insane. I'd clearly lost the plot. And you know what? It worked. His smile was still there. His awful thing was still clasped in his hand. But he stopped advancing and began shaking his head along with mine. No, he looked like a child who'd been told he doesn't get to have ice cream. It was kind of obscene, layering the X-rated adult with the childlike, but he didn't get violent. He didn't force anything. As I kept up my smile and light tone, telling him no and no again, he swallowed. He darted his sticky tongue out across his rough lips and, thank God, finally tucked himself back away. Finally, bashfully, he shuffled back to the door and let himself out. Even after the door closed, I stood for several moments. I was just feeling my breathing slow. I don't know how long I stood there staring at the door. By the time my roommate stumbled in, tipsy and stage whispering, I had at least laid myself onto my bed and was too bone-weary to respond, yet too keyed up to sleep. At some point, the adrenaline wore off completely, and I slept in the next morning, only arising after I heard my roommate get up. I told my roommate what happened. I watched the shock commingle on her face with this blank stare. I asked her what I should do. I half expected her to be pissed I hadn't already done something, but I was wrong. She was very matter-of-fact when she told me not to report it. I must have looked stunned. It prompted her to continue. She told me to look at it as a whole. Did he force his way in? Did he touch anyone except himself? Had he ever threatened to hurt me? All I could say was no. Her eyes were narrow. She said, "Exactly. There's no proof. It is 100%, he said, she said. And if you come forward, look." And at this, she stopped pacing and locked eyes with me before she told me, "It won't go good for you." She went on, somehow knowing my thoughts and answering them like she was telepathic. She understood I wanted, well, something to be done, to validate my terror. But she was doing that now, telling me in no uncertain terms I was believed by her. and she was telling me I was absolutely right about how I felt. It was gross. It never should have happened. It was awful and scary, and implicitly not my fault. But if I did tell or report it, I had nothing for proof. All they'd have to do is point that out. Or worse, say I'd done something flirty, something to welcome it, invite it. Here, her eye contact broke as she looked away, but she still continued talking. She told me, "It won't be okay for you. You drink, you party. You have to know it will drag on forever. A year, more. And the whole time, people will be thinking you're sharing some fault because you sent a drunk text or have a picture of yourself at night in a bar, in a skirt, on your social media." I was stunned. My roommate was right. But what neither of us could get away from was this fear that if he had tried his luck with me, what was to stop him from trying again with someone else? What had stopped him before me? We sat there and finally came up with the idea of an anonymous letter slid under the RA's door, asking for any service visits to be escorted. Had he done it to others? Had anyone else come forward? College isn't like in the movies or on TV. We both knew a couple of people, could recognize faces from our floor, but we weren't insanely close or able to tap into some big whisper net to know details about anything. The next week, it was announced that service visits would be escorted. I never heard about what had happened to me happening to anyone else. And that's that. All's well that ends well, right? Well, no. Because if it had ended well, then why, years later, would I be motivated to read a ton of scary survivor stories, eventually writing my own, telling the tale of what had happened? Because while the heartbeat hammering in my throat fear has subsided, I still kick myself for being such a coward. Not about the cable guy, about my roommate. There's no way she would or could have had that response to what had happened to me without experience. I knew this, but I never had the balls to ask her. I churched it all up in my head as, oh, that's personal, or, oh, I don't want to make her relive it by asking, which she already did relive it. I watched her face as her mind played a rerun she'd probably played 1,000 times before. It was right there, and scared of offending or too wrapped up in my own encounter of making it weird, I let it go by. To this day, I'm sorry for not asking, for not letting her know I was there and I'd hear her out. That's the part I obsessively replay. Not the cable man, not the stinking fear I felt at his gentle yet seemingly inevitable attempt to assault me. No, I replay my roommate's face, her haunted eyes. I hope she found a better friend, one who had her back, was there for her, the way I couldn't or wouldn't be. If she ever hears this account that's really only anonymous to someone who wasn't there, and for those who knew me, it's a big neon sign. I want her to know that I'm sorry for being such a chicken shit and a bad friend. Amy, I'm sorry. Some of these stories get hard to read, and I'm sure they're hard to hear. And yet, I find comfort when I've gone through something scary in knowing that it's not just me and I'm not alone. And neither are any of you. Strangers or not, we found each other here. Imagine who else you're gonna find in the wildest places. As for the rest, well, you know the drill. Email address in the description in case you want to share a thought or a story. Instagram in the description in case you want to go see what weird stuff I post over there. Liking, commenting, and subscribing always appreciated but never required. And until next time, stay strange, stay safe, and take care, strangers.